Hello, my name is host Derek. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People. Tonight I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about my dad. And I want to type in, basically, and my mom, both my parents. I do so because I'm feeling stressed right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed a little bit by all the stuff going on, all the demands on me that exists both spiritually, for my own doing, for a variety of reasons. I'm a little frustrated with myself in general sometimes for my failings. And sometimes I'm frustrated with the world for its failings. It depends. Anyway, my mom and my dad. I've been thinking a lot about them and their type. My mom's a little easier to figure out. My mom's an ENFJ. She leads with FE. Other people's feelings are important to her. She follows up with NI. And I remember when I realized that my mother had a different kind of intelligence than me, or I was probably more dismissive than that. But it was because despite how good she was in front of a group, and despite how good she was with people, she wasn't necessarily good at freestyling, so to speak, at unprepared stuff. I remember noting that at some point, fairly young, and thinking to myself, oh, she can't do that. And being a little confused, I guess, by that fact. She's type 6 on Enneagram, which means she's what's known as a loyalist, and she's very much a worrier. And as she's getting very old now, that gets magnified. She's extremely worried. She worries a great deal about everything. And, I mean, she doesn't in any given moment probably, but given any reason to worry, she will worry. So, I have to be careful around her for sure, obviously. She is her third slot, SE, just as my third slot, FE, has a very visible presence in my life, in the sense that I'm actively seeking out engagement with other people and doing it through this YouTube channel and whatnot. Well, so too, and in fact, to a certain extent, you'd say it's that FE that ultimately is the real passion or the real driving force behind my behavior. Because it's the realm of reward and punishment, so to speak. Anyhow, my mom's SE in the third slot still comes out to this day, and much the same way that mine does, which is to say she's quite passionate about getting exercise, riding her bicycle, jogging, and all that kind of stuff, which I always fucking hated. Exercise for its own sake seemed to me just an absolute nightmare. She's a very conscientious woman. Super on top of everything. A TI is in her final slot. Fourth slot. She's TI as I am SI. But it doesn't mean she's not smart. It just means she doesn't like logic as a way to determine conclusions. My right-hand man Abraham, the same way, and I've never been quite so convinced the legitimacy would have been with him. He's quite convincing that, it's a wholly legitimate way to look at the world. But are so foreign in the I mean, I get the idea of caring. That's the thing. I know enough about feelings, extra feeling, because it's in my third slot, and I do work in that area all the time. The difference is where the focus of the work is versus in what domain the work is. So, he's very concerned about predicting people's emotions, predicting their emotional reactions. Whereas I'm very much about like, well, what does that have to do with anything? We're talking about these specific points I'm making here. I get offended by that perspective, which gets in the way of adjudicating things. The problem that the feeling side has ultimately is, well, what if you've got two sides who feel strongly, oppositionally? How do you resolve that? I mean, with feel, they're right. Anyway, that's not the point. My mom's one of those too. She didn't like the argumentation back and forth between my dad and me, even when it wasn't argumentation. This day even less. She doesn't want to hear any sort of analysis because she associates it with conflict, I think. Even though I don't think either my dad or I think of it as conflict. But anyway, my dad's a more interesting and more difficult person to type. I guess he's probably type 3. Possibly has a bit of 8 in there for sure. He never hit me or anything like that. And he was always a good father to me, and still is, of course. I shouldn't be using the past tense. I don't think of myself being in my childhood anymore, in that sense. Although I kind of am. But, anyway, he was fairly stern. He was fairly directed by my mother regarding like not letting him be too hard on me, basically. And that's probably a good thing. But, he wasn't by nature hard on me particularly. It was more like, he did the best he could to close the distance emotionally, and I don't feel as though he really understood what that meant exactly. He's a strange guy. He's very, very hard in certain ways, very uncompromising. Like, no. I remember growing up, my mom would be like, well, can we go see this movie or that movie, Daddy? And he'd just be like, well, I don't want to see those movies. I'll tell you what, we're going to move. You can go watch that movie in your movie theater. I'll watch my movie in my movie theater. And my mom would not like that, Because, of course, you're supposed to be going on an outing together. You're not supposed to go watch movies in separate theaters. That's the theory, anyway. But my dad was like that, and he's always been like that. He's still like that, and he likes to say, "No." I got that from him, and he's really like just dismissive of everything that's not logic. He's quite he rolls his eyes at the world a lot. When I was younger, he was a little bit more angry. But even then, it would only manifest occasionally. I mean, it's not like I'm not talking about this. It's funny when I talk about my dad, and stuff like that, he comes across much like harder than he was. But anyway, he didn't really know how to bond emotionally with people, is the bottom line. And so he bonded with me by doing things like taking me to lunch, and we'd go fishing on vacations, and father-son stuff, taking me fishing in a boat, and have father-son talks with me. And I would hate it. He'd be like, "Son," and I'd be like, "What? Son, can you come in here for a second? We need to talk about something." "What?" "Son, no, sit down. You see, when blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Oh my God, what are you going to yammer on about?" But then, he's always having little ideas that he wanted me to. It's very same sort of thing repeated with me and Delilah. Little ideas he wanted me to buy into or something. And he wanted to structure things where he'd set up a little system with little rules and shit. And I'd just be like, "Hey, Dad, I don't want to do that." So anyway, I don't exactly know what Myers-Briggs type he is. I would say he's TI for sure, somewhere in the mix, high in the mix. He might be an INTP. He might be an INTP. I don't think he's a J, even though he might be a J. He's smart, but he never wanted to explain anything to me more than one time, that's for sure. He's not interested in coddling at all. He's completely disinterested in coddling. So that was fine. I didn't need to be coddled, my mom coddled the shit out of me, so it all worked out fine. The fact is, I obviously got plenty coddled because I didn't have type 7. I've often thought to myself of late that type 7 is the spoiled type. It's the spoiled child phenomenon. You're spoiled and everything goes well your whole life. You just sort of like barge around going, "Hey, what's over here?" So, yeah, my dad, I would say he had introvert thinking. As far as intuition goes, I don't know. He wasn't very much improvisational, as I recall. And he didn't seem like an ENTP. But he certainly was intelligent and says that he had good models. I guess he could have been. I think it was an I. I think he's an I, probably. He's not particularly talkative. Although, the other thing is, he has a drinking problem, basically, for most of my upbringing. Or maybe it wasn't a problem. I don't know. He drank a lot, but he had firm rules that he followed, like not until 5 p.m. Or not until 6. I think it was 6 p.m. Then he'd get home from work and he'd have a couple quick glasses of wine right before he sat down. Like, pour it. Okay, now I'm ready to sit down. And then he'd drink through the rest of the evening, ending with whiskey. But he would slow down at that point. After the first couple glasses of wine, then he'd slow his consumption. And at the end of the evening, he'd always finish with like a tumbler of whiskey or cognac or something. And go to bed, repeat the next day. And my parents, when I say he had a drinking problem, keep in mind what they were doing. My dad would be doing this alcohol consumption, and they'd both be sitting in armchairs in the living room reading their respective books. So it's not a wild and crazy house I lived in. When it got really wild and crazy, they'd turn on KCET public television. We'd watch Nova together if we had a really crazy evening. So, it's not, yeah, did he have a drinking problem? From my book, yeah, he did. and he eventually quit drinking. Mostly, he pulled that thing you're not supposed to ever be able to do, which is you're an alcoholic and you only drink every once in a while now. That's weird, and I can't explain it, but I can't do that. But he could do that, I guess. So he quit completely for a while, and then he drinks every once in a while now. A beer. That's it. He got really sick in Portugal. Anyway, so I'm curious about his type. I have a hard time typing him. When you're dealing with people of an older generation, they didn't have access to everything that any given personality type might need to help them maximize or actualize, or whatever you want to say. It was an olden times when the information wasn't information about everything in life. Because if you think about it, different types are going to hear certain narratives and respond to them well or respond to them poorly. And if they have no sense that there are a lot of conflicting narratives and that they may be individually attuned in terms of what works and what doesn't, it's not necessarily the same one for everybody, which is kind of what we're taught at the beginning. Like, well, here's an aphorism, look before you leap. Well, that's probably not a message that somebody who is the right type needs to hear, because they're probably going to be naturally cautious. And it's good advice for the ENTP to hear, but it's somewhat difficult advice for us to follow. So, dogs, you guys need to chill the fuck out. Hey, stop it. No. Stop. No. Okay. So, yeah, that's what I have to talk about tonight. And I am feeling a little depressed, I guess. Or anxiety. More a little overrun by kind of anxiety-ish stress factors. It's not quite the same as depressed, but it gives me kind of an icky feeling. I think I should go to bed now. I got to get up in the morning and go to work. Oh, it's 11:20. It's not that late. Well, I still should go to bed now. Anyway, goodbye, Talking with Famous People audience. I probably am going to be a low-frequency uploader for the next couple of days. I'm also trying to put cards in my old videos, like they suggest. I've been doing some research. Say if you can get to 1,000 subscribers, you get this sort of exponential boost or something, and that if you have more than 100 videos up, the boost is bigger. Well, I've got 550 videos or something like that. So I'm going to try to get to 1,000 subscribers. I got to 150. Thank you so much for subscribing if you did. That's it. Goodbye.